The dying process, that's no fun, definitely. But for those of you who are afraid of death, the actual death, that movement between this earth life and into that unknown, I just like to offer that it is not a big deal. It really was familiar, like I have done this before, like it was muscle memory to float. I was going through walls in the hospital. I was really kind of having a good time at first. After I had, just checked out the body, checked out the room, and went. And my body, let me add here, I was still me. I was still Claudia. Everything up here, my memories, my thoughts, my personality was intact. The only thing that I had left behind was this shell, this outer shell, my overalls, my work outfit for Earth. It was like I didn't need it anymore. And so I shed it and I was free. And I explored the hospital. I won't tell you all of the shenanigans, but I ended up in a gentleman's room and kind of doing a, thing in front of him. And he didn't know I was there. And that's when I realized I was dead. It was so natural before that I honestly had not had that thought come through my head that, oh my goodness, I'm dead. So as soon as I thought that, I was in this another place, another dimension, that it was instantaneous, and I was in this vastness. It's really hard to describe. Earth words are really limited, and which is one of the problems I had about talking about my NDE, because I was in this amazing place that was everything and nothing all at the same time. And it was in complete and total darkness. It was black. If I'd had a hand, I wouldn't have been able to see it in front of my face. But it wasn't scary. It wasn't unnatural. It wasn't negative. It was absolutely perfect. I was so loved. I was so held and comforted and cradled within this alive, intelligent. It knew everything about me. And it just swaddled me like a loved child. And I was completely satisfied to be in this place.
And I don't remember even hitting the ground because I left. Before I sat down, I tipped backwards. I saw my sister. I went to another I was lifted out of my body. And I said it after this whole thing happened immediately to my parents. I said, I went somewhere. And I was very disoriented when I came back because I left my body. So what happened was I was pulled out of my body into this beautiful, immense feeling of love. And it was extremely, it was like amnesia was lifted. It was like, I was like, oh, I remember now. I'm trying to put in words. It was like a flood of knowing came to me. And I realized that this experience here in this life, this specific life that you're living, is like a drop in the ocean, a grain of sand. There was this immense knowing of, oh, like, how could I have forgotten? Oh, this is just, if you can, I also like to describe it like, think of all the thoughts you have in your life, right? Millions of thoughts. You can't even keep track. This one particular life that you're focused on right now was like one thought. That's how immense knowing I had. So I went to this place, and I don't remember all the details, but I would say I felt like I was gone for hours. And I hope that in meditation I can learn even more, but I will tell you what happened in that experience. I left my body and I went into this unconditional loving space. When I was about to have to go back into my physical body, all of a sudden I'm looking at my body, and I know that this loving energy is existing behind me. And I honestly can feel the love, like God's love, angels. I feel them behind me. But I knew, and this is the important part, try not to get emotional, but I knew that like if I like turned to the light, which was very, very tempting to do. When I say tempting, it's like more tempting than anything you have ever felt. It was a draw, a pull, because the love was so pure and unconditional, and not even love, but it was like your home, your real home. So to not turn and surrender to that all is well, loving energy, it was hard.
And it was as if I was walking this tightrope, and then all of a sudden I said, well, I'm going to keep fighting it. I'll keep fighting it, keep fighting it, keep fighting it. And then it got to the point where I could not fight it anymore. And I got to a point where I looked at, in my mind at the wife and the kids, and I said, sayonara, and I let go. And when I let go, I let go of life. I let go of everything. And when I let go, a light, the most beautiful, 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 beautiful light, a golden, very bright golden light came somewhere around my eyes, between my eyes, somewhere. And all of a sudden, my physical eyes went cross-eyed and went all the way up. It's an automatic thing, as if it's pre-programmed in our DNA. I went cross-eyed up, all the way back. It was an automatic thing. The light just poured completely in, and I went straight into that light. The light it seemed like it was an infinite magnet. It was an insatiably, irresistible, infinite magnet. It naturally attracted me out of the body. There's a symbol that came, there was a geometric symbol that is associated with that light. It's a very sacred symbol that there was a motion connected with the symbol. And the symbol is what allowed me to come out of the body and rapidly propel somehow toward the light. Within the light, I'm not sure it was a tunnel or whatever it was, but I went boom. At such a high rate of speed, the faster I shot toward this light, the more my heart opened. And as my heart opened, I experienced infinite love. Infinite love. It's no words to describe the love. With the love, there was an infinite ecstasy associated with the love. It was a complete love.
When you can't breathe, you also cannot talk. So I couldn't even answer him. But right after my life flashing in front of me, I automatically started having every worry in the world go through my head. And for me, it was everything about my child, because at the time he was only 5 years old. So I instantly was worrying how he was going to be, if he was going to be okay, how was he going to grow, what was going to happen with his life, and how would life be without his mom. It was devastating to go through that. And immediately after all that worrying that I could have possibly had, I wasn't here any longer. When I landed, and it felt like it happened so quick, when I landed up there, I immediately realized how it was the most peaceful place I had ever experienced. However, I didn't know where I was, but I was peaceful. I was very comfortable. There was so much unconditional love. There was no worry at all, as if nothing happened prior to that. I had no pain whatsoever. I remember looking around and I could feel a very dominant male presence. However, I could not see an actual male figure. I remember looking around and I could see my physical dead body laying in front of me, about 6 feet away, where my head was to the left and my feet were to the right. and I could see my eyes were closed, that I was not breathing. I knew that part of me was dead. And it was almost as if I had that mental telepathy of information, meaning I had to actually say goodbye to my physical body because I was no longer going to be with that anymore. When I landed there as well, I realized I couldn't see colors aside from huge contrasts of black, grays, and whites. And I remember looking around because it was very unfamiliar, even though I said to myself, I remember distinctively how, wow, this is home. I'm home, meaning we all have homes where we live here on earth. And of course, our homes, most of them are amazing. That's our peaceful place. But it was unlike that. That was truly home. There was every bit of perfection in every way there.
I went into a coma. The nurse gave me a big dose of morphine because I hadn't been able to sleep or anything for many days because of the fluid in my lungs. And I was in so much pain and so much discomfort. And then on February the 2nd in the morning, I didn't wake up. So it was at that point that the doctors told my family that these were my final hours and that my organs were now shutting down and I was going through the dying process. But what everybody around me didn't know was that I had left my body and I felt amazing. I could see and feel and hear everything that was happening all around me, but I felt light and free, and all the pain was gone and all the fear was gone. Something that I call unconditional love, just I'd never felt anything like that in my physical life before. And I was aware of my body lying there in that hospital bed, but my body looked so small and helpless and lifeless compared to how I was feeling now. And I wanted my family to know that I'm fine. In fact, I'm better than fine. I feel fantastic. But there was no way for me to communicate with them. I was able to see and hear everything the doctors were doing, like they were taking fluid out of my lungs. And it was very different from having physical eyes. It was more like I had 360-degree peripheral vision. I could be aware of things that were happening behind, on the sides, above, below, everywhere, and beyond the walls. I was seeing and hearing conversations take place beyond the hospital room. And my husband was talking to the doctor outside, about 40 feet away, outside the room that I was in, and I was able to see and hear everything. I could even see and be aware that my brother, who was living in a different country, he was living in India at the time, I was able to see that he was rushing to get on a plane to come and reach me because he wanted to get to me before I died. I remember even feeling, gosh, I better not die until he gets here.
My blood sugar was drastically low. I was basically almost unconscious at the time. But she got me into the hallway outside our bedroom and on the 3rd floor. And I remember at that moment, I had a change within my soul. My body was down on standing up, reaching out to her, and I came out of my body. And it was an amazing experience to witness and see. I ended up rising up like a drone would rise up from the ground, and I was going up and up and up into the ceiling of the hallway. And I was up in the ceiling, looking down at my body, reaching out to my wife. It was an amazing out-of-body experience. I couldn't believe it. And what I was seeing myself still alive, reaching out to my wife. And to me, what happened after was just incredibly amazing. But in that instance, as I reflect back, I know, and I have a strong feeling when you're about to die, I feel as though God takes you prior to death. And to me, a lot of people worry about death or where they're going and how they're going to go. To me, in that instance, the Lord grabbed my soul, took it out of my body. I was able to see myself still alive. And to me, it felt as though God was taking me out of my body prior to death and into everlasting life. So from one life to everlasting life. To me, that's what that felt like as I reflected when I came back. And I'll describe that as well. When I'm lifted out of my body and I have that out of body experience, you don't feel anything. You don't feel any worries. You don't feel any pain. You're just watching yourself, your body itself, physical body just still staying there. And to me, I knew I was no longer within that body whatsoever. And I knew that my life was most likely going to end, so I didn't get to experience my last breath. I didn't get to experience a death moment. I didn't get to experience pain. I was lifted from it. And even afterwards, as I talked to further people in my church, in my community about that experience, death experiences of their aunts, their uncles, their moms, their dad, they honestly have told me stories that confirm in such a way that they would see stuff prior to their relatives dying, things that would, like the wind would blow in or a door would open. They saw stuff that was amazing, and they saw things that occurred prior to their mom or their dad or their aunts and uncles dying. I feel and truly witnessed myself being removed from my body and not feeling anything type of my last breath or my death moment, which is comforting. It should be extremely comforting that the Lord takes you. He doesn't let you feel death. He takes you prior to that, from this life to everlasting.
And I was holding the telephone to my ear, and that was when you had landlines back in the day. Mm-hmm. And lightning came down the phone line. It hit me in the side of the head. It went down my spine. It welded the nails of the heels of my bass regions to the nails in the floor. If it hadn't grounded by welding those nails, I would have exploded. It threw me in the air, slammed me back down, breaking the bed frame. And I was burning and on fire, and I could not see. And when you experience not knowing what happened, couldn't have ever imagined lightning. So I was trying to get to a position as a defensive position, as a fighter and a combat guy, and I could not move. I could not move, and I couldn't see where I was. And my God, the pain, every nerve ending was burned. I mean, I have pictures of what I looked like 8 days after that, and you can see the spine, my bruises down my spine, every vertebrae had a big bruise on it where it had just twisted me in the air. And then all of a sudden I lift up out of my body. I could see. I wasn't in any pain. And it did not matter where I was. I was not down there anymore. And I'm looking around and seeing that everything is vibrant. You would think it was solid, but nothing is really solid. It's like the Matrix. It's just not all those numbers. And everything has a certain resonance and a frequency. And I was looking at all of that. And somehow I knew this place better than I had known that 25-year-old punk, where I was now. And I watched them. The guy on the other end of the phone was a corpsman in the Navy. He came straight over. He lived really close. My girlfriend was just to take a CPR course. And so she was pounding on me, and then TM got there and they worked on me. Say, call the paramedics, went next door, called the paramedics. I'm just floating around. I'm looking at everything. I'm so disconnected from it. And this is going to happen to everybody, Alex. You'll be so happy when your time comes that you won't know what to do with yourself. And the biggest thing that people do is grieve about losing you. Well, that only slows you down. It only holds you because you stay connected to them instead of them celebrating your life. So I watched them load me in the ambulance, and I figured I better go with me, okay, because it was a new and interesting reality. So I'd better go with me. So I cannot figure out how I was floating above the paramedic working on me. And I had visual range. I don't know how that possibly worked, but I did. And then the guy said, he's gone. And I thought, well, gone where? I mean, the paramedics here, the lumps down there where's anybody gone? And then over my left shoulder, this spiraling tunnel. And it was moving whether I was moving or not. And I could feel myself being pulled down it. And I would move down this tunnel and I come in this place of bright, brilliant, beautiful light. You know, everybody will have an inner knowing, Alex, that they've been there before and that they know this place. There is no fear. And a lot of times when people have fear at the end of life, someone that they trust and know comes to get them. What people don't understand is all of this led me to become a hospice volunteer.
And it was pretty much at that point that I left my body. I left all the trauma and the agony that I was going through in the emergency department. And I went from that to a beautiful, darkened space. But it wasn't a foreboding darkness, it just felt very comforting. And I remember looking around and seeing like these orbs of colours that were slowly pulsating around me. They were just they were almost like landing lights to an airport. And I figured pretty much at this point that I hadn't made it. I thought, okay, this is it. I've died. I didn't resist it. I didn't try to sort of come back. I know I've read since that some people do. They'd say, no, I've got too much to live for. I've got my kids and everything. And they try to resist. But I didn't, because I didn't want to die. But what I'd just been through was just such a horrific ordeal that it was just great to be in this sense of calmness, and just feel good. And I kind of got my bearings. I looked around to see where I was, and I noticed I was no longer laid on a hospital trolley, but I was laid on this huge rock. It was like a big slate sort of rock. It was like, I describe it as being almost like a medieval altar. And oddly enough, it felt very comfortable to lie on this rock. And I realized that I was no longer clothed. So I was checking my body for my injuries, and everything was back in place. There was, my left arm was back in place. There wasn't even a single scratch or bruise, and I just remember thinking, wow, this is amazing. This is, everything is back in place, and I'm just covered in this blue sheet. It was like a satin sort of silky texture of a sheet, and there was white light reflecting off this satin. So I looked up and I saw like 3 grids of white light that were like coming down over my head, and I sort of laid back and put my head back and I looked into this light, and the light was just so intense and bright that normally it's the kind of light you wouldn't be able to look into with the human eye. But in this sphere, I was able to do that. I was able to look. In fact, I couldn't take my gaze away because the intensity of this light was so pure, and I felt like it was healing me as well. I felt like a sense of that something good was coming from this light. And me of old would have been thinking, oh my goodness, I can't see my family. I would have been really distressed, but I didn't feel that distress. It wasn't like I didn't care, I didn't love them. There was no irrational feelings. All I could feel was, okay, I will be seeing them at some point, and if I don't, they're going to be experiencing all this beauty that I am, and they're going to love it.
It was, in fact, in the middle of the day, as I was preparing for a master's degree class, and I suddenly noticed in the middle of the room that there was a black dot right in front of the stereo, hanging in the middle of the living room. And I didn't have any background or knowledge of near-death experiences. I had begun to have a series of very interesting spiritual experiences, but I had no idea what was happening. Fortunately, a boyfriend was with me. We were just eating a sandwich and drinking iced tea, and I asked him, do you see the black dot? It's right there in front of us. And he said no, he didn't see it. But it also came with a sense that someone very near to me appeared to be dying. And I said, do you feel all right? And he was disturbed by this. He didn't like the way I was acting, and suddenly it got much worse. I was pulled directly through the black hole into a dark tunnel, and I found myself rapidly moving toward a tiny, tiny little point of light. And the tunnel was freezing cold. I was frightened. The feeling of coming out of my body was like being sucked out, almost violently, very hard, and I had no idea what was happening to me. The next thing I know, I'm standing in a beautiful light, and everything, absolutely everything has changed. I am happy. I feel free. I'm joyous that this has happened. I don't understand it, but I'm standing in an ocean of golden white waves, this light with crystalline drops everywhere like diamonds floating in the air.
And by the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, I was completely winded. I could not, I could breathe out, but I could not breathe in. Like my muscles were just paralyzed. What's interesting is that I had always been very afraid of dying. I had always thought that death would be a terrifying experience. And in that split second, when I breathed out a couple of times and I realized that I could not breathe in again, it suddenly dawned on me, I'm dying. I'm going to die. If I can't breathe in, I'm going to die. And what was amazing to me is that I was totally calm. It was just this amazing feeling of acceptance and peace that came over me. And I was like, well, I'm dying and I'm not even scared like I thought I would be. And it was just this total acceptance that there's nothing I can do. I'm just going to die, and that's it. And I kind of gasped my way, and my ex-wife was actually standing there in the basement, and I just gasped out to her. I said, call an ambulance, I'm dying. And she obviously didn't know what was going on. So she ran upstairs to tell my mother that something was wrong. And in the meantime, I collapsed. I like blacked out, and I collapsed down on the basement floor. It was a finished basement, so we were staying there. There was carpeting and furniture and everything. And then the amazing thing happened when, after a split second of like black nothingness, I suddenly found myself completely awake and conscious, and I was looking at a body lying on the floor in front of me. And I thought to myself, wow, isn't that strange? I thought that I had really injured myself falling down the flight of stairs here, but I must have been dreaming, because I feel totally fine and I have no pain. I must have just had a horrible dream that I injured myself and I was dying and I had all this pain, and now I'm awake, and it must have been a dream, because I feel perfectly well and I have no pain now. And then I looked at this body on the floor and I kind of thought, like, is it me? Is it like, what is that body doing on the floor? Why is that body on the floor? And then the whole basement was filled with this kind of purplish haze light. It was like a light purple cloud but it had light in it. And then, like, before I could really collect myself and try to figure out what was going on, I felt and I kind of saw from my left side a portal opening up, like a doorway opening up. And immediately I felt sucked towards that portal.
And boom, I was about to go on a trip. The angels came up, they escorted me out of my body, and in fact I got into the tunnel and went to heaven. So I was right when I said touching Brenda was like touching heaven. That's exactly where I went. So I got in the tunnel, I went to heaven, and I saw a number of different things. Before I talk about what I saw, I have to describe what it was like to leave, because that was so fascinating to me. My preconceived notion about death is that when you're done, you're done. When your heart and your lungs stop beating, you sort of just turn to dust. You cease to exist. And I was fascinated to find that as I left my body, I was still every bit of the person I am today. I had the same thoughts, the same feelings. All I was doing was leaving my body. And I have to tell you quite truthfully, I was very happy about that, because my body was causing me a lot of problems. It was dying, and I didn't want to die. I wanted to keep living. So when I left my body, it was really delightful to find that I was still present. And so I got into the tunnel without my body, I just left it, and I went to heaven. And when I got to heaven, it was absolutely wonderful. And I'm sure those of you who've been here before are used to hearing what heaven is like. And know that none of us really have any words to fully describe what it feels like. We just don't have the vocabulary here. But what I remember so clearly, and the best words I can use are, first of all, I say, think about the most wonderful or pleasurable experience that you've ever had in your entire life. And multiply that by infinity. It doesn't come close. It doesn't come close. That's the closest I can come to describing it. It doesn't come close. And I see John here nodding in agreement. It doesn't. But what it felt like, you're in a place of such total acceptance. You're at one with everything. There is love everywhere. You become part of the love and light. So it goes through you and you start emanating it. You are totally part of that. You are complete. Everything is tranquil, everything is peaceful. There's no judgment anywhere. You are just part of the love and light. And it's the most wonderful experience I've ever had in my entire life.
So from what I remember, I fell. I hit my head. I fell backwards, so I landed on my head, and I immediately my consciousness, my spirit and my soul left my body at that very exact moment. So then I'm hovering over my body for not very long, because immediately I was transferred to this other dimension, this other reality, this other realm. I know a lot of people say that they see a tunnel with a bright light at the end of it. I didn't see that. What I experienced was just instantaneous and simultaneously. So as I saw my body, my small 5-year-old body laying on the floor, and my parents rushing over to me, and everyone being very upset about what had happened, I saw my life through their eyes, if that makes any sense. So I saw things from different perspectives all at the same time. And this other reality, this other realm. And from what I remember, it was really beautiful. It felt very peaceful, very serene. It just felt like home, like my true home. I mean, I had just left my home, it seems like to me, and went into this other home that I had, that I always knew that I came from, actually.
And those bombs came right down on my position. And I was blown up by one of the bombs, and the shrapnel hit me in the face and crushed my face in and tore out my right eye. And there I was, 19 years old, lying on the ground. No mom to come kiss it and make it better. I realized that I was probably going to die right there. And suddenly I was in this dark corridor, a dark tunnel, kind of gliding upward. And there was no more battle sounds, no more pain. I was still wounded, but I had no more pain, no discomfort. I wasn't worried about anything. Everything was very comfortable. And I came out in this bright white light. And I was stunned by the brilliance and the beauty and the sense of knowing, of just all knowing that was there. And I was not sure where I was, but I knew that I probably had died and that I was now in another dimension.
I felt so weak. I felt so disoriented, and my heart was going so quickly and then beating so slowly, going back and forth like that, until all of a sudden I just felt it stop. and I popped out of my body. And the moment that I popped out of my body, I felt so free and so weightless. And I felt so amazing. And I knew I had died, and I didn't even want to look at my body. I wanted nothing to do with it. My mind also felt completely different. I wasn't worried about anything. My emotions were completely different. I just felt a complete peace. And I knew exactly what to do since I had been out of my body so many times before. I knew to fly straight up. So that's what I did. I just started flying higher and faster. And after a little while, all of a sudden, everything went black just for a few seconds, but it wasn't scary at all. And then it lifted. And when it lifted, I was over this beautiful valley, and I saw mountains in the background, and I saw flowers everywhere, and it was just so beautiful where I was. And I suddenly saw flying beside me to my right side this gigantic, hundreds of feet tall being, and he was made out of pitch black smoke. And I realized, though, that this was just a costume that he was wearing, because underneath he was a unconditionally loving and light being, and he had the most beautiful white light and love energy just emitting from his eyes and his nose and his mouth and his ears. So that's how I knew he was wearing a black smoke costume. And he had these gigantic wings, and I understood that this was the actual angel of death. And everything had gone black for a few seconds because he needed to help me get to the right place of where I needed to go to transition on. So he had scooped me up in his giant wing to help me get to the right place. So I thanked him for helping me. And everything is telepathic in that realm. Just like my angel experiences in my youth, everything is always telepathic, and it feels just so wonderful and natural to do that. So I thanked him, and in return, he said, "We are pleased for you to be back home." And then I saw him fly to the side of a mountaintop, and he was just scanning everywhere and looked like he was watching over everyone who was transitioning on for that day. Then all of a sudden I saw the brightest white light that just shone down from above, and I just went into the light. And the moment that I did, I was just absolutely encompassed with unconditional love and light. And the light was an actual energy, and it just permeated throughout me. And it was unlike anything I've ever experienced in this lifetime before. There's just no comparison to it. It was so wonderful, and I just wanted to go up into that light. And I knew the light was coming from God, and I knew it was coming from a higher area of heaven.
I was losing my breath constantly. I wasn't able to breathe. I wasn't able to get air into my lungs anymore. They weren't opening. And all of my organs started shutting down one by one, and my heart. I could feel it beating slower and slower, and I would do things like jump up and down, and I couldn't get any air into my lungs, and my heart just wasn't cooperating. And I lost consciousness as a result, and took my last breath. And as I took my last breath, that's when I left my body. And I remember as I'm leaving my physical body, floating up to the ceiling and glancing down one more time at the paramedics that were coming to help me, and knowing that that was me, and yet I was up above at the same time with the real me, the spiritual soul, watching all of these events unfold. And I let go. And as soon as I chose to let go, that's when I was embraced by this incredible light in this tunnel that propelled me at an incredible force. It was so powerful and so magnificent, so loving. I've never ever felt this kind of love before, and it's really a challenge to put in words to describe the magnitude of the love and the embrace that I felt in this tunnel.
So the very last thing that happened before I left my body was that my eyes were rolling to the back of my head, and I couldn't control my breathing anymore. And that's what alerted them, because the guy with his finger on the button heard me hyperventilating. So I was going, and he then stopped talking to the other person and leaned over me And he saw that my eyes were rolling back, and I was trying really hard to focus on it, but I just couldn't keep them straight. And he then raised upward, and he leaned back to see where his thumb was. And that's when he made this look like, oh my God. And right at that point, I died. And I didn't realize that that's what happened, of course. I just shut my eyes on my body, and the next second, I was up on the ceiling, and I was looking down on the entire room and my body, and I said, huh, if I'm up here, my body's down there, and he's calling code blue, I think I just died. So there was panic right beforehand. I was highly panicked over what I was involved in. I'd never been in anything weird like that before. But the second I was out of my body, there was no panic whatsoever, and it was very calm, and I felt wrapped in love. Now, the reason why I felt so amazingly wrapped in love was because the minute that I said, I think I died, I realized there was an incredibly amazing presence next to me. And I don't want to impede on anyone's religions or anything, but my feeling was that it was God.
One of the things they showed me on the other side was that so many people for so many generations have held such intense physical trauma and hardship. And that one of the things that we're doing at this time is we're sort of unprogramming that trauma, and we're unpacking it, so to speak, and clearing it from our systems. And I believe that's one of the reasons why now we're seeing so many near-death stories and so many of us able to talk about this, so that you don't have to go through that yourself. Because I will tell you, it's a hard experience. Not necessarily doing it, actually dying itself is one of the easiest things to do. It's a really beautiful process, and you don't ever die. You just release your physical body. And I always tell people, it's like when you go trade in your Ford for a jet plane, right? You can get the sense of, I'm driving my Ford around and I go trade that in, and somebody gives me a jet to ride around in. So it's a totally different experience, but you're still the driver. You're still driving a vehicle. It's just a different vehicle. And I also got on the other side that when we pass away, that we get a lot of choice in where we go next. And ultimately, that choice, and this is really important, that choice has a lot to do with what you're thinking and feeling when you pass away. So for me, that was my near-death experience. It was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Like I said, it's a beautiful experience. And I also believe that you cannot die before it's your time. That really, truly, that if it's not your time, you won't be able to do it. And in my case, I wasn't able to do it fully, right? I got the choice to come back. And as you've heard, so many of these near-death survivors get the choice to come back.
Whatever your intention is, whatever your belief is, as you are going through that process of leaving the physical body and going back to your true essence, your energy, your soul, that determines how rapidly you go completely back into the unconditional love, or whether you create some intermediate place for yourself that you have to work through the energy of. If you want to cling to the earth, you have the ability to do that for a period of time. The idea of the whole thing is that you're not taking any negativity that you've experienced in this life with you, unless you choose to lug it along in a backpack or drag it with you. What you are doing is you are leaving all of the negativity in this world, because this is the only place where there's negative as well as positive, and you're going home to a completely positive, unconditionally loving place where you meet all of your friends, your family, the rest of your soul group, your consul, everybody that didn't come down to the physical plane or had previously meet you back home.
We live in a culture where it's been rubbed into us in every conceivable way that to die is a terrible thing. Alan Watts said that, and it's true. As a culture, we believe that death is the end of everything, that it's the scariest thing we'll ever experience while we're here in human form. And I guess if you don't hear anything from me, I want you to know that it's so magnificent on the other side. It's such a joy to be on the other side. And that from here, it's a graduation. It's not an ending. It's a continuation in your soul's evolution. It's a moving into new and more uplifting adventures. It's not a loss of anything. And your energy continues on. I know there are many religions that believe this is the end of the road, but I'm here to tell you it's not. I was raised a Catholic, 12 years of Catholic school, and they do not believe in reincarnation except for maybe Jesus Christ. So when I realized what the truth was on the other side, it made me rethink my religion and my interaction with it. And through these years, because I had my near death in 81, so I've had a long time to work this out. I'm a spiritual person. I am not a religious person. I'm pious in my beliefs, but I am not religious. And I found that religion for me, and I'm only speaking for me, was too limiting. It was too confining a box for me to be in. I no longer needed a priest to have a connection to God. I could go directly to the source, and I do constantly. I'm in constant contact and communication, and it serves me well. So we all have to find our way and what feels right to us, and I think the most important thing is to trust what you know and what you believe, because nobody knows better for you than you. And here I am, absolutely enraptured. I felt feelings that I had never felt even as a child, as a newborn with my mother. I felt cherished in a deeper way than I knew you could experience. I felt like everything was right and all right, and that nothing mattered except being in the present of this experience and in this feeling. And all of this information that came in this moment of being there, when you cross over, you're privy to all of the universal information. You might not retain it when you come back, but you are there in it in that moment. You are connected to all there is and all that is. And I was so grateful to be there.